नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य दिनदर्शी अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna. So thank you all very much for joining today's session. So I'm sorry we had to postpone our session. I could not take it on Tuesday because I was traveling. Actually, I had reached, but still I didn't want to take a chance just in case if there was a flight delay or something like that. So I didn't want to take a chance. So that's why I postponed it to Friday. So I know for some devotees it may be difficult to join because they may have other commitments on Friday, but hopefully they will get to hear the recordings. Um so we have been discussing from the fourth verse of Manah Siksa, which from fourth verse onwards we have been discussing about uh, the anarthas, various levels of anarthas, from the grossest till the subtlest type of anarthas and how we can overcome them. That's the theme that we have started discussing from the fourth verse onwards. So we will chant the fourth verse and then we have been discussing from the commentary of His Holiness Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj. So we will discuss that. Uh, we will continue that discussion where we left off. So we'll chant the verse. Asadvarta visrijamati sarvasvaharani Kata mukti vyagrya na shrunu kila sarvatmagilani Api tyaktva lakshmipatiratimito vyomanayani Vraje Radha Krishnau Swarati Mani Dautvam Bhajamana. So here Srila Raghunath Das Goswami says that, oh my dear mind, Asad Varta Veshya Visruja. Please give up this prostitute of Asad Varta. So we saw Asad Varta can mean gossiping. Varta here means words. Asad Varta means words, mundane words, right? Or Asad Varta can also means actions. So Asad Varta means those actions which enhance Asat Trishna or thirst for material enjoyment, which is uh, अत्याहार प्रयासश्च प्रजल्पो नियमाग्रह जनसंगश्च लौल्यं च षड्भिर् भक्तिर् विनश्यति. The six practices which Srila Rupa Goswami says are detrimental for one's progress in devotional service. So this is also called as Asadvarta, and this is compared to a Veshya. Veshya means a prostitute. Why? Mati Sarvasva Harani. Just like a prostitute steals all the valuables that her customer has. Similarly, engagement in these materialistic activities act as a prostitute, stealing away all that is valuable for a devotee, which is his devotional credits. So, and Mati Sarvasva Harani, it steals away his intelligence, which naturally flows towards the lotus feet of Krishna, that is stolen away by this Asadvarta. Kata Mukti Vyagrya Na Shrunu Kila Sarvatma Gilani. And he says that stories about liberation or glorification of liberation, he says is Vyagrya. Vyagrya means a female tiger, right? A female tiger which devours the soul, because ultimately it stunts the ability of the soul to um, experience his constitutional position of being servant of Krishna, because the desire for mukti literally kills the desire to serve Krishna. The desire for servitude is killed by that mukti spruha or the desire for mukti. And then he says, Api tyatva Lakshmi Patiratim ito vyomanayanim. Also give up the attachment to worship Radha, attachment to worship Lakshmi and Narayan, because that kind of worship is not very conducive for attaining the abode of Goloka Vrindavan, where one can serve Radha and Krishna in a very sweet mode of intimacy, right? So rather, Vraje Radha Krishna Swarati Manidau Tom Bhajamana. So rather, my dear mind, worship Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan, because if you worship Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan, he says Swarati Manidau. They give you the jewel of their own love. Swarati Manidau. Like that. So this is where this is the meaning of this verse. And last time we started discussing from Bhakti Vigyan. I mean, we have been discussing from Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj's commentary for the last almost like 3 weeks probably. So we will directly go. We already discussed a few themes from his commentary. So we did discuss about the first theme that we discussed was attachment through mercy. So, where the essential theme that he discussed was all the obstacles in our life are due to lack of attachment to Krishna. So, what is the solution? The solution is attachment to Krishna. How to get that attachment? Through mercy. And how to get that mercy? By endeavoring to please them by worshipping them, right? Bhaja mana. So, basically, this uh, uh, this section, in this first section, he talks about what is the uh, he's talking about bhajamana, attachment through mercy. By worshipping Krishna, or by endeavoring to worship Krishna, he says that you get attachment to them, right? So this first section he talks about bhajamana. So bhajamana means endeavor, right? So endeavor leads to mercy, mercy leads to attachment, and attachment leads to removal of all obstacles in life, right? So we discussed this, and then this was the first theme that we discussed from Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj's commentary. Then we discussed about mundane topics. So what kind of endeavor will attract the mercy? So he says the endeavor is to endeavor to, one of the first endeavors is we have to endeavor to give up asat varta or mundane talks. And then he discusses about this very elaborately about newspapers, internet, television, all that gives asat varta or mundane news, which dresses who dresses herself as a very attractive prostitute, who can actually steal away all our desire to serve Krishna. And then he gives the example of Akbar and Birbal, where Akbar asks, show me, your scriptures talk about witches and apsaras. So show me an apsara and a witch. So he brings a prostitute and shows that this is the witch, and he shows his own not so young and not so beautiful wife, and introduces her to Birbal, introduces her to Akbar as the apsara, because she is very chaste and she serves him like that, right? So then we discussed this theme, uh, Okay, right. So then, yeah, then he discussed about, he gave this example of how our mind is compared to a, to a undeveloped film. Mind is compared to a film, and the samskaras or the impressions in the mind are compared to undeveloped image on that film. And clicking the camera, the act of clicking the camera is compared to material sense gratificatory experiences that we have. And he says that the developer solution, a conducive environment, the developer solution is actually an environment that enhances prajalpa, right? So, uh, so therefore, the mind is there, the photographic film is there, and since time immemorial, we have been uh, accumulating these past vasanas. So the undeveloped film is also there. So, so the only thing that is there in our hands is at least we can um, consciously endeavor in such a way that the developer solution does not come in touch with the photographic film. Because when the developer solution is an environment that is very surcharged with an opportunity for prajalpa, and all these kinds of asadvarta or atyahara prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha janasangascha laulyamcha shadbir bhaktir vinashyati. So if these there is ample opportunity for these six kinds of exchanges, then very quickly the uh, the film is developed into photographs, right? Then it becomes very difficult. So he says, so therefore he says that one should definitely oneself from these kind of environment, which can actually enhance asadvarta and eventually steal our intelligence, which has a natural propensity to flow towards the lotus feet of um Radha and Krishna, right? So then, and then he mentioned that the first result of gossip is that we become indifferent to bhakti, and then the second result of gossip is that we become very eagerly attached to worldly news. Huh? Like that. Then we spoke about, then we did discuss last time screen time, right? So one thing is definitely planning. So we have to actively plan, right? So as to how we can minimize it. Praying, right? Praying constantly to Krishna that Krishna please protect me. Then the third thing that we saw was engagement. There should be accountable engagement. There should be no free time, because uh, free time and free space and free internet. This is um, you know like a recipe for disaster, you know, and an uncontrolled mind, right? So, so an engagement takes care of the free time, and if we surround ourselves with good association, it takes care of free space. So if there is no free space and there is no free time, then we are quite safe actually, right? So then uh, the next point that we saw was allocate time to spend with real people rather than just spending time with the in the virtual world. Allocate time to spend with real people, and if you cannot give up social media, we discussed that how we could uh, we could train ourselves to have meaningful exchanges, even if we have to indulge in social media. Let's have some meaningful exchanges with devotees rather than meaningless whiling away of time, right? And then we could join many bhakti groups to get some good association. We could work on some screen time lock, beyond that particular time the screen will automatically get locked. And another suggestion that we saw was no screen time before one completes one's sadhana. So uh, then I have written something. Identify uh, vulnerable times. Identify times when we feel very vulnerable to sense gratification and create engagements during that time. Next is we could increase our number of rounds. If you have a commitment of extra rounds, the extra rounds take away your time, and somehow throughout the day you feel like I'm running short of time. I'm running short of time. Actually, if you constantly feel like that, it's very good in one sense. And then set very tangible spiritual targets, right, to achieve, so that it can create some kind of accountability. So these are like very devotees came up with these various kinds of solutions. So I think this is very very wonderful. I am sure many of you would have taken screenshots of this slide. If you have not, then you can take screenshots, or I will also send the PPT. So the very very wonderful points devotees have shared, almost 12 points devotees have shared. So this is very very useful, right? So then he says that, and one of the very powerful means by which we develop this asat trishna or deep thirst for material enjoyment is one of the is through the one of the most detrimental forms of prajalpa, which is offending and criticizing others. Okay, this is a very very um, detrimental form of prajalpa, the most detrimental form of prajalpa, which can actually create you know mountain of material desires, which are very difficult to overcome actually, right? And then he says that criticism is the worst form of prajalpa. So therefore, paraswabhava karmani ya prashamsati nindati sa ashu brashyate swartat asati abhiniveshitah. So if one either glorifies or even criticizes the nature and activities of others, then very quickly one gets distracted from their real goal of life, and they fail to achieve the real goal of life, right? And rather they get absorbed in the temporary pleasures of this world, right? So, and generally we criticize others, especially behind their backs, because that is a very powerful way of nourishing our own false ego. We start feeling very good if we have pulled down others, if we have spoken badly about others. you know we have a very perverted feeling of you know being very good. I feel very good because I have shown the other person on bad light, right? So, so then about praising others mostly for some material benefits, with some ulterior motives. Sometimes we may praise others. That is indicated here. He gives the example of the story of Abraham Lincoln, who, uh, who visited a blacksmith's shop, and the blacksmith would constantly keep glorifying him because because the blacksmith's assistant had taken off on that particular day, and he was not getting help. So he would glorify Lincoln so that he could take some help from him. This is again a very spineless act, where we just want to superficially glorify others so that we can get some material benefits from them. This is not good actually. So, and then he says that engagement in this kind of material criticism or material praising, uh, uh, such a person loses his spiritual intelligence. And what does it mean to lose one's spiritual intelligence? Losing one's spiritual intelligence means to lose one's spiritual memory. When one gets so much absorbed in these material activities, then one loses the spiritual memory, which means whatever we have planned to progress and on the path of spirituality, and whatever we have planned to escape material miseries, uh, we lose that memory. And second thing is, we lose spiritual discrimination also. What is right, what is wrong, what is favorable, what is unfavorable, we lose that discrimination also. And the third thing is that we lose determination to progress further. We become very complacent and we think that this is all right, already I'm doing too much, like that. So, and then he explains that what is the mechanism by which uh, uh, you know uh, by engagement in prajalpa we become absorbed in the temporary. Okay. So the first thing is that the result of criticizing someone is that our material desires gain strength and our false ego gets nourished, right? So, and the example of Ramachandra Puri is described. Okay. So uh, then uh, so in this way, gradually, when the material desires increase, then we start indulging in those kind of material desires, uh, and so on. And the example of Ramachandra Puri, how he criticized his own spiritual master, uh, and then eventually because of that, his desire to criticize more increased, his material desires increased, right? And it is mentioned in Vasana Bhashya that even Jivan Mukta can actually fall down from his stage of liberated stage if he engages in criticism or offense, right? So then, uh, so he quotes from Srila Jiva Goswami that how even such a Jivan Mukta, because of his aparadotta anarthas, the unfavorable desires which are born out of performing aparadas, that increases. And then one gets into this vicious cycle where one offends, then one's material desires increase, and when material desires increase, and one of the powerful ways by which we try to shield or justify ourselves through those material for those material desires is to offend more, right? We criticize more so that we don't feel very guilty of our own situation, right? So, because already, because of our inability to control our mind and senses, we are feeling very guilty, and somehow the mind looks for means of overcoming the guilt. And the easiest way to overcome guilt, the more difficult way to overcome guilt is to rectify our shortcomings, rectify our bad habits, and all that. It's a more difficult way. There is an easier way of escaping the guilt, which is to find faults with others and criticize others. But by doing that, what happens? Our material desires increase more, and we indulge more in materialistic activities, and we feel more guilty. And when we feel more guilty, uh, we look for means to escape that guilt, and the easiest way to escape that guilt is to criticize others, find fault with others who are doing well. So, but by doing that, again our offensive mentality increases, and then when we end up offending, our material desires increase, and so on. And this, we get caught up in this vicious cycle. So the reason why we are discussing this is to identify that uh, we are prone to get into this vicious cycle. So somehow we have to stop it somewhere. So when the inclination to offend comes, then take shelter of devotees, take shelter of prayers, go and fall at the feet of devotees, beg forgiveness, and suddenly we will realize that our material propensities, it has become little more lighter. Our material desires have become little bit more weak, and then we have to again pray more to escape, and cover ourselves with solid devotees association, so that we don't succumb to those material desires. And when we don't succumb to those material desires, uh, then we experience the internal strength. And when that internal strength is experienced, then we get more, with that enhanced strength we can go and beg for forgiveness, and be more offensive. So we have to start the auspicious cycle. Somewhere we have to break this vicious cycle, because this vicious cycle can have a very quick snowballing effect actually. And I am sure, I mean, some of you must have experienced it. I can tell for myself, I have experienced it in my own life, right? This is a very vicious snowballing effect, where you start offending, and then you can clearly see that because of the offensive mentality, gradually your sinful desires increase. And when the sinful desires increase, uh, then you, uh, in order to escape the guilt, you you start finding faults with others. And this is a very, I mean, this is a very pathetic situation. We definitely need help. We should seek help. We can't allow ourselves to get sucked up in this kind of a vicious cycle. Good association is very important. During these times, we should not, we have developed this crow mentality. So and naturally we would look out for, um, just like birds of the same feather would always want to flock together. So naturally, when this criticizing mentality gets in, uh, naturally we would look for other people who are other devotees also, who are going through this crow syndrome, you know looking for filth. So naturally, because you know uh, shared the joy is double joy, shared sorrow is half the sorrow. So um, so therefore we look for same kind of company. So this is where we make the biggest mistake. Actually, ideally we should look for someone who would pull us out of this quicksand. It is literally like a quicksand only. So ideally we should look out for uh, the kind of association who would be willing to pull us out of this quicksand and give us a kind of relief, which is more spiritual, rather than keep fanning our false ego, and keep criticizing the people in our association. And in one sense, we will end up digging each other's grave. So this is where we need to be very careful about this vicious cycle. That is why we are discussing. One of the prominent ways of overcoming this situation is to actually discuss about it, because we should know the precarious condition that we are in. We can't we can't take up the ostrich approach. We can't just bury our head inside the ground and think that the danger has gone away, right? So So therefore, actually we have to be little strong here. We have to take strong associations, strong prayers, and somehow break this vicious cycle, either at the stage of material desires or at the stage of offense. Whatever it may be, the only means is to accept good association. Good association does not mean those people who will just, uh, you know, uh, blow some cool air on our boils, right? So that is not going to, which is like, fanning our false ego. Good association means those who are genuinely concerned about our spiritual life and will pull us out of this quicksand of this vicious cycle before it eats us completely. Actually, so this is good association, and once we come out of it and escape this vicious cycle, then a very strong spiritual gratitude will fill our hearts, and we need to experience this relief of escaping this vicious cycle. We need to experience this gratitude of escaping this vicious cycle, and we need to cherish these thoughts, and help these thoughts actually nourish our heart. So then what happens? Then the next time we sort of try to slip into this vicious cycle, we know what to do, because we have had a very good positive experience of somehow being pulled out of this quicksand of this vicious cycle. So therefore, good association is absolutely important. We cannot hope to escape this situation without good association. It is not possible actually. So therefore, uh, these kind of discussions are very good ways of escaping this kind of material uh, situations. So one powerful way of doing it is actually discussing about it. Many times we don't want to discuss about it because we want to just not feel guilty about it. But somehow we have to discuss, we have to plan, we have to take help, we have to pray, and in this way, slowly, we will gain the strength to escape this vicious cycle. Right. So we did discuss about this. Yeah. So therefore, we should understand that this is actually a powerful prostitute which can steal all our hard-earned devotional credits. Right? We have not come uh, to a spiritual organization to engage in mass criticism and offense, even though the tendency may be strong, especially uh, in an institutional setup, uh, uh, where devotees engage in managing people, managing resources, managing money. Uh, so naturally, this leads to fault finding and envy and criticism, uh, and eventually defeats the whole purpose, because we were engaged in these things even outside the institution. Right? So we did not come to a spiritual organization to engage in the very same things which we were engaging before coming to Krishna consciousness. So therefore, we have to take serious responsibility of our own spiritual life, and one of the best things that we can do to uh, to take up that serious responsibility is to find out good association, where the people are not interested in talking about others, but they are interested in talking about one's own progress on the path of devotional service. So this is the trap of material energy. So we should not fall into that trap. And even Maya Devi does not want us to fall into that trap. Right? Maya Devi wants us to, uh, to escape the trap and come out victorious. Right? So like that. So this is one thing that we discussed last time uh, about this, the prostitute of mundane talk gossiping, and the most vicious form of it is to find faults with others and criticize others like that. Okay, so and then we did start discussing about liberation, which we could just complete one or two slides. So I'll just pause here and see if there are any quick comments, discussions, questions based on what we have discussed last week and what we have recapped this week. So, so I'll pause for a few seconds to see if there are any quick comments. You can please raise your hands. We can discuss for a while and then move on to today's discussion. Anyone? Okay. So if there are no questions or comments, I think we will move ahead to today's discussion. So, okay. So we started discussing last week about Mukti Katha or liberation. Right? So discussing about liberation. So what is discussing about liberation? Discussion about liberation means escaping material miseries, not wanting to suffer material miseries. So this is mukti, because mukti means liberation. Liberation means what? Liberation from suffering. So this desire for liberation is compared to a tigress, right? A tigress is much more ferocious than a tiger, right? She very fiercely attacks and kills that person completely. So he says that after Raghunath Das Goswami explains that if you value your spiritual intelligence, stop talking on material topics. He says, Kata Mukti Vyagrya Na Shrunu Kela Sarvatma Gilani. Hmm? The next Katha, which is highly dangerous to those following spiritual path, is Mukti Katha, or talk of Mukti, liberation. He says that these conversations are like tigers that will devour everything. Right? She can devour your soul, your mind, and your intelligence, because all this is Atma. It is Sarva Atma Gilani. Okay. Atma refers to soul, mind, and intelligence. So Sarvatma Gilani means it can completely devour your soul. Soul means what? Devouring the soul means um, destroy the true ego. Jivera Swarup Hoy Krishnara Nityadas. Right? And destroying the mind means it does not allow spiritual impressions to manifest within the mind. And destroying the intelligence means it destroys our value system. Right? We value Krishna Prem. We value establishing a relationship with Krishna. So all that is destroyed. So destroying the soul means destroy the true ego. Okay, and destroying the mind means not allow spiritual emotions to develop. And destroying the intelligence means destroy our pure devotional value system. You know, where we don't value, uh, uh, you know, we don't value escaping from miseries, but we value actually uh, a meaningful relationship with Krishna in one of the five rasas. Right? In a sense, this Mukti Katha or talk associated with liberation is even more dangerous than Gramya Katha, talks of material enjoyment or benefits, worldly religion or material duty. So he says that this Mukti Katha is more dangerous than even uh, uh, Prajalpa or material Katha. Why? Hmm? Actually, you all know this verse. I will just add a slide. Hmm. So you all know this verse, which comes in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? 2.3.10, right? Akama sarvakamo va mokshakama udaradihi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param, right? So he talks about akama. Akama means devotees who have no material desires. Sarvakama means bhuktikami. One has all kinds of material desires. And he says third type is mokshakama, right? Which means one who desires liberation. He says all these categories of people can, if they are intelligent, they will worship Krishna and they can achieve their results, like that this verse says. So here in the purport to this verse, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains there seems to be some problem with the order in which this is described. So ideally, Akama is topmost, right? So these are devotees. Next should come actually Moksha Kama, right? Next should be Moksha Kama, which is the Gyanis. And next should be Sarvakama, which is the Karmis, right? So this should be the order because this is Akama is the best, Moksha Kama should be the second best, and Sarvakama should be the worst, right? But the actual order that is given in the verse is first is Akama, second is Sarvakama, and the third is Moksha Kama. Why this kind of an order? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti says, actually this is the right order and this is the wrong order. Why? He says that Akama are the devotees, right? They have no material desires, no material desires, or desire for liberation. So they are the best. Okay. And if you see between the Sarvakama and the Mokshakami, actually the karmis, their absorption in achieving material benefits is very weak. Hmm? So if you see, uh, uh, they if a karmi, he will aspire after some material benefits, uh, but he will not pursue it very hard, because if it is too difficult, then he will aspire after a different material benefit, after a different material benefit. So the his absorption in enjoyment is much weak compared to a jnani, a mokshakami. Their absorption in attaining liberation is very strong, right? Oh, okay. So there, okay. Yeah. So their absorption in attaining liberation is very, very strong. That is why if you see their, uh, they perform such severe austerities to attain what they want. Whereas if you see the karmis, you will hardly ever see them performing very severe austerities. They will be like very happy-go-lucky people. Okay, if I don't get that, I will aspire after some other material benefit, like that. Of course, they may also engage in very, in attaining some material benefits, but the intensity of that sacrifice, the intensity of that enjoyment that they want to experience, or the sacrifice that they want to perform to achieve that enjoyment, is very weak actually. So therefore, a muktikami's mind, a muktikami's mind is way more absorbed in mukti than a bhuktikami's mind in mukti, sorry, in bhukti or enjoyment. So therefore, if that mind is so intensely absorbed, then they cannot apply it in Krishna. Huh? So therefore, if you see in Bhagavatam also, whenever bhakti has to be glorified, hmm, whenever bhakti has to be glorified, uh, or the glories of Krishna, Krishna's qualities, form has to be glorified, uh, the litmus test is always the Gyanis, the Muktikamis, right? Because if they accept bhakti, then everyone else can accept bhakti. They are the most difficult to accept pure devotional service. Even a karmi can take up to pure devotional service, but for a jnani to take up to pure devotional service is extremely difficult. You may say that, oh, this sounds not right. Let us take some examples, right? So some examples, if you see, the example of, Sutta Goswami speaks. He says, Atma Ramascha Munayo. Nirgranta api urukrame kurvanti ahaitukim bhaktim ittam bhutaguno harihi. Right? Here if you see, the word api comes again and again. Api means even they took up to bhakti. Ittam bhutaguno harihi. Such is the wonderful nature of Krishna's qualities, Lord Hari's qualities, that even the Atma Rama means what? Jnana Yogi. Jnana Yogi means what? One who is after liberation. Lord Krishna's qualities are so attractive that even a Jnana Yogi gets attracted. So when you say even a Jnana Yogi gets attracted, which means they are the most difficult to get attracted to the path of pure devotional service. So Muktikamis, right? If you take the example of Shukadeva Goswami, he tells his own story to Parikshit Maharaj. I will not write the whole verse. Parinishtitopi nairgunya uttama shloka leelaya grihita cheta rajarshe akyanam yadaditavan. He says, how attractive was this book of Bhagavatam? How attractive? He says, even I got attracted. What is the big deal if you get attracted? Shukadeva Goswami says, you don't know about me. He says, Nairgunya Parinishtito Api. Again, the word Api comes. Even though I was perfectly fixed on the path of liberation, even I got attracted. Grihita Cheta Rajarshe. Even my mind got attracted to Srimad Bhagavatam. So if even my mind got attracted to Bhagavatam, which means Bhagavatam should be very, very attractive. Otherwise, people like me, the Brahmagyanis, it's very difficult for us to get attracted to anything of this material world. Right? Which means such people are very difficult to get attracted. Because they are so focused on their goal of liberation. Because they have absolutely no hope from anything of this world. They are completely convinced that anything of this material world cannot satisfy them. So therefore, they are so focused, right? Like if someone is uh, is making his first attempt on CA for writing CA, and let's say if someone has, I don't know how many attempts are allowed. Uh, let's say there are 4 attempts allowed. Okay, so if someone is making his first attempt in CA, he may not be that focused. But if let's say someone has missed the qualifying marks by 1 or 2 marks, and he is already on his 4th attempt, he knows that he can't afford to fail here. So how much focused he would be. So similarly, the Bhuktikamis, even though they are committed to enjoying in this material world, they do have hope. If enjoyment does not come out of this, I can enjoy something else, something else, something else, something else. So their focus and their absorption is not as strong. Whereas a Muktikami is completely convinced that I cannot enjoy anything of this material world. But ultimately, he also wants to enjoy only. So the desire for escaping material miseries is a selfish desire only. It is not a selfless desire to serve Krishna, it is a selfish desire. And desire to enjoy in this material world is also a selfish desire. But the difference is that the desire to escape material miseries is a more absorbing desire than the desire to even enjoy. Therefore, Mukti Katha is described to be more detrimental than even Prajalpa. Okay. Third, if you see the case of the four Kumaras, about the four Kumaras it is mentioned, Tasyaravinda Nayanasya Padaravinda Kinjalka Mishra Tulasi Makaranda Vayu Antargata Swavivarena Chakara Tesham Sankshobam Akshara Jusham Api Chitta Tanvo. You see, again the word Api comes. He says Akshara Jusham Api Chitta Tanvoho Sankshobam Chakara. In order to describe how attractive is the Supreme Lord, it is mentioned that even the four Kumaras got attracted. Their mind and body got completely affected. It got completely shaken by the fragrance that emanated from the lotus feet of Krishna, lotus feet of Lord Narayana, which entered their nostrils. Even they got affected. So why should the description be that Akshara Dusham Api Chittatanvo? Even they got attracted means for such people to get attracted to Krishna is very difficult because they are so absorbed in achieving that mukti. Huh? That mukti also being a very selfish desire, and it is a more absorbing selfish desire than even the desire to enjoy in this material world. Therefore, for such people to accept the path of pure devotional service is very, very difficult. Right? So, uh, therefore, again, there are so many other verses. I don't want to go into details, but the point is, wherever Bhagavatam has to establish the glories of Krishna's beauty or Krishna's qualities or Krishna's pastimes, he says that it's so wonderful that even the Gyanis get attracted, even the Atma Ramas get attracted, right? Like that. Even the Mukti Kamis get attracted, like that. So, therefore, it is mentioned here, in a sense, therefore, Maharaj writes here, in a sense, this Mukti Katha or talk associated with liberation is even more dangerous than Gramya Katha, talks of material enjoyment or benefits, like that he says. And there is an explanation to this, and this is that explanation. To explain false topics, the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita refers to the second verse of Bhagavatam, where Vedavyas says, Dharma projita kaitavotra paramo nirmatsaranam satam. Right? In Srimad Bhagavatam, there is no kaitava dharma or cheating or telling lies. Right? So, any quick comments about what we have discussed till now about Mukti Katha? Of course, we are going to discuss further. But if there are any quick comments, discussions till now, whatever we have discussed, you can please raise your hands and we can discuss for a while. Madhavi Gopi Mataji, I'm unmuting.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat
Yes.
Prabhuji. Prabhuji, this was very interesting discussion, like to know that the Mukti Kamis are even more dangerous, their desire than the Bhukti Kamis. But I have one question which is not directly related to the subject as such, but we always talk about Shukadev Goswami being, he was Brahman realized, and then later on he turned as a devotee. So this is a long-standing question in my mind, that Shukadev Goswami was in spiritual world, he was the parrot of Radharani herself. So he was with Radharani and Krishna, and then from there he came just in the womb of Vyasadeva's wife. So when was the time that he turned from devotee to Brahmavadi and then to later turn again?
That is just a pastime, Mataji. Actually, he is actually a Nityasiddha devotee only. So Nityasiddhas do come to the material world to enact some pastimes for people to understand. So Shukadeva Goswami enacted that pastime to establish the glory of Srimad Bhagavatam. Um, like sometimes Arjuna is also put into such kind of bewilderment. And even our own acharyas, if you see, even though they are Nitya Siddhas like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, uh, you see that he was initially a Shakta, he was practicing Shakta Dharma. Then, after some time, he explored some Islam, some Christianity, and finally, incidentally, he came in touch with a copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita. He got attracted, and then he took up the practice of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. In one sense, uh, that is from a very superficial point of view, just to show others that at any age, uh, at any stage, you can accept the path of bhakti, just to show that. But in reality, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is an eternal associate of the Lord. So, what is a chance that such a person can get attracted to, the incomplete religious principles? Right? So many times, these nitya siddhas do perform such pastimes to set the right example for people to follow. Even in Sri Vaishnava Sampradayas, the there are they don't call them nitya siddhas, they call them nitya suris. So nitya suris are also eternal associates of the Lord. The 12 Alvars, they are said to be the eternal associates who are the, uh, you can say, like the incarnations of various paraphernalia of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Like someone is an incarnation of Kaustubha Mani, someone is a incarnation of the Kaumodaki mace, someone is an incarnation of Chakra, someone is a incarnation of Shankar. But in their stories also you see, someone was a thief, someone was, but who eventually became a very perfected devotee. Someone got attracted to a prostitute. Like there is a Tondaradi Podi Alvar. There is one Alvar like that. He got attracted to a prostitute. So there are many such stories. So this is just so these Nityasuris, they perform pastimes which seem very very ordinary and mundane, and eventually actually they overcome that situation, accept the path of pure devotional service and perfect it, just to show, just to give confidence to common people that anyone can do it, anyone can practice bhakti, whatever can be your situation. You may be a brahmagyani, you may be a person struggling with your material vices, material habits, or you may be a person attracted to uh, uh, you know the mukti and the liberation. So any whatever you may be, but you can get attracted to bhakti, just to show that these devotees, these eternal associates, are utilized by the Supreme Lord to perform such pastimes. So Shukadeva Goswami's case is like that.
Okay, thank you so much, Praveen. I learned a lot from your answer. Yeah, thank you.
Krishna Prabhu, I'm unmuting you.
Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
I just wanted to clarify when you were mentioning that devouring soul, mind, and intelligence. When you're talking about devouring intelligence, you said it destroys our pure devotional value system. Can we also say that it destroys our determination in devotional service?
Determination, discrimination, memory, all that is connected to intelligence. Yeah, it
Okay, okay.
destroys that also actually.
Okay. And one more thing, did you mention about the jnani becoming a devotee? You are giving examples. Did you mention anything about Sutta Goswami? How he
No,
got
Sutta
converted?
Goswami, no. Sutta Goswami speaks that verse, Atma Ramachandra. Sutta Goswami was not a.
Okay.
Uh,
He was a
speaks
devotee
that.
right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Prithviraj Prabhu, I am unmuting. Prithviraj Prabhu, I am unmuting. I have unmuted.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat
Yes,
Pranam.
Prabhu. Dandavat.
Prabhuji, my question is, Jnani and Sakama Karma Yogi. So basically, in yoga progression ladder, if we talk of, there is for the Jnanis, there are two paths, right? One is Brahman realization, and another is like if he comes in contact with devotees, he can also go to, he can become also a Bhakti Yogi. So here, when we are talking of Jnanis, so they are who are like perfectly situated in Brahman realization, not to the other kind of.
What is the other kind?
Other kind like in yoga progressions, like Sakam Karma Yogi, then Jnani, then let's say Dhyana Yogi, then he can also become a Bhakti Yogi.
No. That becoming a Bhakti Yogi is not a direct thing. In yoga ladder, Bhakti Yoga never comes in one sense. What you see as yoga ladder is actually a yoga hierarchy. You know,
Okay.
so it is not like every Ashtanga Yogi naturally becomes a Bhakti Yogi. It is not like that. So, so, so it's
So,
not like by naturally practicing Sakama Karma Yoga, Nishkama Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Ashtanga Yoga. Naturally, the next stage is Bhakti Yoga. You know, no one becomes a Bhakti Yogi like that. Actually.
okay. So, Prabhuji, let's say in Jnana means a Jnani also there will be a various degree of practice, right? Suppose someone just become a, let's say, okay, someone just become a, means he's not practicing, let's say, this path of Jnana for a long time. And maybe it's a gradual progression from a Sakam Karma Yogi to a Jnana Yogi. So then I think, is it not like he has a better realization to when he comes in contact with a devotee, he may take the path of Bhakti Yoga as compared to a Sakam Karma Yogi? Of course, I understood the point of absorption, okay, but here then how to...
No, it is not like that. Uh, but still, by then, his desire for that liberation will also be very strong, no? Because of purification of his heart of material desires. He understands that nothing in this material world is worth pursuing. So therefore, liberation is the only ideal goal. So, along with this progress on the path, his attachment to liberation has also become very strong. So, such a person, even though if he may come in touch with pure devotional service, the desire for attaining the goal of liberation has become so strong that it will be very difficult for him to give it up. Actually.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Anything else, anyone, before we move on to continue this discussion about Mukti Kam, or desire for liberation? Okay, so we will continue. There are no questions. So here he continues, Srila Bhaktivigyan Goswami Maharaj. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami begins explaining all this, and he says that false deceptive dharma, or the false goals pursued by people which will squander their human form of life, are dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So false religion, kaitava dharma means what? Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Of course, this is kaitava for one who is aspiring for the panchama purushartha, which is Krishna prema. If one does not know about the panchama purushartha, for them dharma, artha, kama, moksha is all right. So, but otherwise, if one is aspiring for Panchama Purushartha, then for them Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha are all not worthy to pursue. Of these four, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that the greatest deception is liberation, moksha. Liberation is not deception, right? We have to understand. Liberation is not deception. Desire for liberation is. Right? So that is a deception, right? Uh, mm, like we can say, like say, when a mother desires that the child grow up, okay, because when the child is very small and young, uh, 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 the child needs all the attention of the mother. So the mother has to bathe the child, clean the child. If he may pass stool and urine, she has to keep constantly changing his diapers, cleaning that mess and all that, feeding him and all that. Uh, the, the mother may take great pleasure in seeing the child grow up. Okay, so that desire is fine. But if she desires that the child grow up very fast, so that he will stop being a headache for me. Okay, so then that is an improper, unfavorable desire. So liberation is something which automatically a devotee will get when he tries to please Krishna, when he tries to establish a relationship with Krishna. Mukti is automatically achieved. But if the if the if the devotee is aspiring for liberation and not for pleasing Krishna, then that desire for mukti can be so absorbing that it will kill the desire to please Krishna. Actually, the greatest killer is this. This is because why is mukti most dangerous? He says this is because when a person pursues the goals of artha, kama, or dharma, they at least try to become the ruler of only a limited scope in this material world. Little bit they try to enjoy, right? Uh, when a person starts pursuing the goal of moksha, they are no longer satisfied to rule over a limited scope in this material world, right? They don't want dominion over the 14 planetary systems also. They want something higher than that. Then the higher the aspiration, the more absorbed their the more intense would be their absorption to achieve it, right? They want to rule over everything. In essence, they want to be God, right? As Srila Prabhupada says, that this is the last trap that the mind can fall into. This is the last trap of Maya, Prabhupada says. Our acharyas do not skim on biting remarks about moksha. As Srila Srinivas Acharya writes about the six Goswamis in his Shad Goswami Ashtakam, he says, Kaivalya Nistarakau. One of the primary goals of the six Goswamis is Kaivalya Nistarakau. And Srila Prabhupada gives a very graphic translation to this phrase. He says, the six Goswamis are dedicated to save the living entities from the jaws of liberation, right? As if liberation is a shark waiting to devour the living entities. He says, the six Goswamis are dedicated to save the living entities from the jaws of impersonal liberation, he says, right? For example, Srila Rupa Goswami wrote his famous verse in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Bhukti Mukti Sprhayavat Pishachi Hridi Vartate, Tavat Bhakti Sukasyatra, Katam Abhyudayo Bhavet. He says, he calls As long as the witch of bhukti and mukti, spruha, as long as the witch of the desire for bhukti and mukti remains within the heart of a person, how can the desire for bhakti manifest in that kind of heart? Like that he says. Of course, this is a very famous verse, and uh, you know, as soon as he says that the desire for bhakti and mukti is a witch, witches seize us and suck out everything from us. So he says, Vallabhacharya, the great founder of his sampradaya, came to read the manuscript of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and said, everything is written so sweetly, but I do not like this verse. How can you how can you call Mukti a witch? So he said that actually Rupa Goswami requested Vallabhacharya to edit his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Vallabhacharya kindly agreed. When he was glancing through Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he said, everything is fine, but how could you write like this? You know, the Shastras glorify Mukti, and you are calling Mukti as a witch, as a Pishachi. This sounds very offensive. So I am going to edit this. Okay. And so Srila Rupa Goswami said, okay, thank you very much. You please edit it. And then he went to Yamuna to take bath. And as soon as Jiva Goswami understood that Rupa Goswami has left, he immediately ran out after Vallabhacharya and he said, dear sir, dear Acharya, you are wrong. Of course, he spoke in a very humble way. He said, can I just clarify one small thing? So Vallabhacharya said, what is it? Jiva Goswami said, dear Acharya, what is bad is the desire for liberation, not Mukti herself. Mukti Devi herself is not bad. Mukti is very glorious. But the desire for Mukti is bad. Just like when the child grows up and becomes self-dependent, it is very good. It gives great joy to the mother. But while the child is growing up, if the mother is constantly thinking, when will this fellow grow up so that I don't have to clean him, I don't have to feed him, I don't have to ensure that I don't have to wipe his stool and urine, you know, it is so disgusting. Uh, what can I do? Uh, you know, if the mother thinks like that, that is not very auspicious. But when he grows up, the growing up of the child itself is very auspicious. But when the mother thinks that the child should grow up so that I don't have to suffer, you know, that is not a very auspicious desire like that. So Jiva Goswami clarifies, carefully look at the verse. Rupa Goswami is not calling Mukti to be a witch, but he is calling Mukti Spruha, the desire, being consumed by the desire to escape material suffering. That is what he is addressing here as a witch. He says, Rupa Goswami, my spiritual master, has written, Bhukti Mukti Spruha, the desire for Mukti is bad because it is a witch. So many people want liberation, and the goddess Mukti Devi bestows liberation. Krishna himself is called Mukunda. Mukunda is one who bestows liberation, Mukti. Mukti Pradata iti Mukunda. Right? Rupa Goswami said, yes, of course, I will correct that. I will edit this verse and write something else. When he told this to Rupa Goswami said, yeah, sure, sure. I will edit it and I will write something else. But Jiva Goswami, who was standing nearby and who was fanning Srila Rupa Goswami, uh, he um, he clarifies. He says, "Why is it a witch? What does it deprive us of? The desire for liberation deprives us of our own nature. Right? What is our nature? Krishnera Nityadas. Our nature is that we are eternal servants of Krishna. And a servant does not think about inconvenience. A servant thinks about the convenience of his own master. But if the servant is constantly meditating on his own inconvenience, then he can never serve the master properly. So therefore, this desire for liberation is a servant who is actually constantly meditating on his inconvenience. But Krishna is such a master that even when you desire to serve him, he will remove all our inconvenience. Right? But these people, they don't have that kind of faith in Krishna. So when we become obsessed by the desire of liberation, we forget who we are, that we are servants, and that we can be truly happy only in relationships. So the problem with the Muktikamis is that they have a bad. What is the problem with the Muktikamis? The problem with the Muktikamis is that they have a bad experience with respect to this material world. And the second is they have not developed spiritual emotions. Okay, they have not experienced spiritual relationships. They have not experienced spiritual emotions. So therefore, for them, uh, they cannot fathom how could any relationship be blissful, because that is not our experience, right? So what is Brahmajyoti? Brahmajyoti is where, or Brahma Sayujya is where there are no material sufferings at all. Complete destruction of material sufferings and no material relationships also. And of course, no spiritual relationships also. But because they don't know anything about spiritual relationships, they think this is the most blissful thing. I don't have to suffer at all, and I don't have to deal with any material relationships. What to speak of, uh, master servant relationship, right? And the interesting thing is that I can stay there eternally. I can eternally stay there, not suffer the material sufferings, um, and I don't have to serve anyone. There is no material servitorship. So actually, this is a very, very attractive proposal in one sense, especially for people of this world who have always had a bad experience with living in the material world, experiencing material relationships. If you describe what Brahmajyoti is, actually it is very, very attractive. So that is why it is very important as devotees. That's why if you see Prabhupada, whenever talking about Brahmajyoti, Prabhupada says that, oh, Brahmajyoti, even if you go to Brahmajyoti, you have to fall down from Brahmajyoti. He says that. But in reality, if you check Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, there is no single verse which indicates that if you go to Brahmajyoti, you will come back. In fact, the Shastras talk the opposite. I will show you sometime both from Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, actually verses which indicate that one who goes to Brahmajyoti, the description is that Yad Gatvan Nivarteta. One who goes there does not come back. There is a description. Rather, if you search for any single verse which indicates that one who goes to Brahmajyoti falls down again, you will never find a single proof for that. So there is only one verse that Prabhupada generally quotes, which is Yenya Ravindaksha Vibhukta Maninas Tvayastabhavat Avishuddha Buddhaya Aruhya Krichrena Param Padam Tataha Patantyado Anadrita Yushmatankara. He quotes this verse. Generally, this is the verse which is quoted by Prabhupada. But interestingly, if you see, this verse is very often quoted by Prabhupada. It is many times quoted in the text of Chaitanya Charitamrita also. But if you see Prabhupada's translation of this verse and explanation of this verse, Prabhupada says many times, they fall down from their position of imagined superiority, he says. So, in one sense, they don't fall down from the stage of liberation, but they fall down from that stage of their imagined liberation. They never attain. That's why they are called as Vimukta Manina. Vimukta Manina means they think that they have achieved liberation, but in reality they don't achieve that liberation. And other acharyas explaining that verse, they indicate that this is the stage of a Jivan Mukta. A Jivan Mukta is still in his very same body. He has become qualified for liberation, but because of rejecting the lotus feet of Krishna, he does not attain that liberation. So real liberation, such people never attain. Okay, but Prabhupada constantly says one falls down from Brahmajyoti, falls down from Brahmajyoti. Even though, if you see the Shastras, the explanation is exactly opposite to it. The Shastras do say that one does not fall down from Brahmajyoti. So now, one of the reasons why Prabhupada does it is to actually de-glamorize Brahmajyoti. But actually, if you describe Brahmajyoti as it is, okay, so what is Brahmajyoti as it is? I will just take one slide and add. So I will use Prabhupada's terminology. Okay, just hold on. It's my PowerPoint is rebelling. Anyway, so if you describe Brahmajyoti, what is Brahmajyoti as it is? It has three aspects, right? The first aspect of Brahmajyoti is that it is, I think, just hold on for a second. Something is wrong with my PowerPoint. Just got hung, so I'll just have to patiently wait. Anyway, so the first aspect of Brahmajyoti is that it is there is no material miseries in Brahmajyoti, right? And the second aspect of Brahmajyoti, yeah, I got it. Okay, Brahmajyoti as it is. Okay, what is Brahmajyoti as it is? Okay, no material miseries. Okay, second aspect is no material relationships. Huh? So no material relationships, especially master servant relationship. Okay, and then okay, Radha Damodar Prabhu has written Natad Basete Suryo Na Shashanko Na Pavakaha. I didn't mention about that verse. That definitely talks about Krishna's abode. But there are other verses which talk about Brahmajyoti, and it is not Yadgatvan Nivartante, it says Yadgatvan Nivarteta. And I will find out and I will get back. There are a few verses that is definitely there in the Shastras, in Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita only. The other acharyas clearly explain that to describe Brahmajyoti only. And the third aspect of Brahmajyoti is that uh, uh, you don't have to come back. So, actually, if you see a sadhaka in this material world, who is actually experiencing material miseries, adhyatmik, adibhautik, adidaivik kleshas, and who has had problems with his relationships in this material world. It could be even with devotees and even with authority figures within a spiritual institution like ISKCON. He may have had a very troublesome relationship, and as a as a Jivatma, an eternal living entity, you want everything eternally, you don't want temporary, anything temporary. So, if you see, when Brahmajyoti is described as it is actually very, very attractive. That is why Prabhupada, whenever he talks about Brahmajyoti, he never have you ever heard Prabhupada focusing on this point of there is no material miseries in Brahmajyoti? Have you ever heard about Prabhupada emphasizing on there is no troublesome material relationships in Brahmajyoti? Have you ever heard of Srila Prabhupada talking about Brahmajyoti being eternal, or you can eternally stay in Brahmajyoti? Prabhupada actually never focuses, and rather he goes one step forward and he says, you don't have to come, you definitely have to come back, Prabhupada says. Okay, this is you know you can say like our own parampara way of deglamorizing Brahmajyoti. Okay, and they constantly do it. Our acharyas do it. Why do they do it? Because in the sadhana bhakti stage, where the devotees have, the only way you can create an attraction for the spiritual world is that if you can explain to them the bliss of spiritual relationships. And because we cannot very successfully do that, it is very difficult to uh, uh, you know describe the spiritual world as being very attractive, uh, uh, because we have not experienced that kind of a master which we are very satisfied serving. So therefore, whenever the question of service comes, we try to escape service in one sense, right? So, and if someone says, oh, in Brahmajyoti there is no service, then you think, wow, silently it is a very attractive thing, within our heart we think, ew, is that a problem, or uh, is that a very attractive proposal, right? So our parampara has its own way of deglamorizing Brahmajyoti, because it is the second best option. Okay, it is the second best option, and if you cannot clearly explain what is so good in the first best option, whereas in the second best option all its attributes are naturally very attractive, then you have to actually deglamorize it. So that's what Prabhupada does, in one sense, if you see. So, therefore, as devotees, it is absolutely essential uh, in our personal interactions with others that our interactions should give others a glimpse of what spiritual relationships could be. It should not keep reminding other devotees of the same old material relationships only, you know, which is very disappointing. If we don't endeavor to give a very pleasant experience um, of uh, uh, of relationships, then indirectly we are actually pushing them in the direction of appreciating residence in Brahmajyoti. Because if all kinds of experience in the material world, including experience with devotees, is actually so disappointing, then why would they get attracted to establish a relationship with anyone for that matter? And if people get disgusted with establishing relationship, then naturally the only option that gives scope for that is Brahmajyoti, where you don't have to necessarily get established in a relationship with anyone, right? So therefore, as devotees, you know, every interaction that we have with other devotees, or even anyone for that matter, it's if we can somehow uh, keep in mind and that we have to give a very favorable experience to the other person so that he gets attracted to spiritual relationships. Otherwise, we are indirectly pushing them to appreciate Brahmajyoti only. So this is something that we need to uh, understand, right? So he says, when the desire to somehow or other eradicate suffering becomes very strong, then we forget Krishna and devotional service. Right? So why would we think about Krishna? What remains within us is this single false desire, and we think, that's it. I will now become God. I just have to realize that I am God. Of course, here Muktikam is used synonymously by Maharaj with a desire for that with a Mayavad understanding. Of course, Muktikam does not necessarily have to be accompanied by Mayavad understanding, but this is one way of doing that. Srila Rupa Goswami explains that a devotee may accept liberation, but only those forms of liberation acceptable to Krishna, which is Salokya, Sarshti, Samipya, Sarupya. These are the personal forms of liberation. They are accepted by devotees. Lord Chaitanya says, Mama Janmani Janmanishware Bhavatat Bhakti Rahaitu Kitvai. I am willing to stay here life after life if that means if that means I get to practice your unalloyed devotional service. I'm willing to stay here life after life. At the same time, we know that we need to go to the spiritual world because that is where the devotees live. So if one aspires for the spiritual world because that's where you get all the devotees association, then that is not Muktikam. So what is Muktikam? Muktikam means uh, desire to go back so that I don't have to suffer. This is Muktikam. So what is not Muktikam? So what is not Muktikam? He says that I desire to go back so that I have only devotees association, so that um, my consciousness will be protected. So all this, so this is not Muktikam, right? If you see in uh, if you see in mm, if you see in uh, Prahlad Maharaj's prayers. So Prahlad Maharaj offers prayers. He says, Naivodvije paraduratyaya vaitaranyas tvadvirya gayana mahamrita magna chitta. Shochetato vimuka chetasa indriyartha maya sukaya baramudvahato vimudan. He says that, my dear Lord, um, um, that Naivodvije paraduratyaya vaitaranyas. I do not desire, I am not fearful of this material world, he says. I am not fearful of this material world. I am not fearful of suffering in this material world, he says. Why? Tadvirya Gayana Mahamrita Magna Chitta. I can easily overcome the suffering of this material world by singing your glories and discussing Krishna Katha. But the same Prahlad Maharaj says, त्रस्तोऽस्म्यहं कृपणवत्सल दुस्सहोग्र संसार चक्र कदनात् ग्रसतां प्रणीतः बद्धस्वकर्मभिरुषत्तमतेन्द्रिमूलं प्रीतोपवर्ग शरणं वयसे कदानु. He says, त्रस्तोऽस्म्यहं कृपणवत्सल. He says, my dear Lord, I am really afraid of this intense material world. Samsara chakra kadana prasatam pranita. Why are you afraid? You just said that you are not afraid. He says, I am afraid because, my dear Lord, you have put me in the association of these demons, right? But all these demons hate you. They want to kill you. They want to fight with you. And in their association, I am afraid that I may also become inimical to you. Therefore, when will you take me closer to your lotus feet, where all the devotees reside, and those devotees glorify you? In their association, I will also develop a desire to glorify you. So Prahlad Maharaj does say that, please take me back to your lotus feet. But is that mukti kam? No, that is not mukti kam. That is actually bhakti kam only. That is desire for bhakti. So what is mukti kam? So Muktikam is a desire to go back so that I don't have to suffer. And what is not Muktikam? I desire to go back so that I have only devotees association and my consciousness will be protected. So if for such purposes one desires to go back home, back to Godhead, that is not really Muktikam. Yes, in this world it is difficult to practice devotional service. Therefore, we can accept liberation in order to get a place where everyone is engaged in devotional service. So that is not Muktikam. Maharaj writes, man is a gregarious animal. It is easier for humans to do something everyone else does. So the mob mentality is very strong. And when we are here, we start doing what everyone else is doing. Therefore, our goal is to reach the spiritual world and serve Krishna there. As Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, we accept liberation only to be able to serve Krishna in a better way and not for any other purpose. If there is no service, we reject even liberation. Salokya sarshti samipya sarupya ekatvam apyuta diyamanam na grananti vina matsevanam janam. Kapildev indicates the nature of pure devotional service. He says that if there is no opportunity for serving Krishna, then Salokya Sarshti Samipya Sarupya Ekatvam Apyuta Diyamanam Na Grananti. Even if Krishna offers all these various kinds of liberation, we don't want to accept if there is no opportunity to serve. So now Maharaj says, one devotee, a professional psychologist who offers consultations to devotees, said that to his greatest surprise, 95% of the devotees actually want liberation rather than bhakti. Well, uh, in one sense, my understanding is that as an anartha, desire for liberation may be there. I find it very difficult to accept that 95% of the devotees, they want liberation as an abhilasha or a most cherished desire. So I personally don't feel that Maharaj would be talking about such kind of devotees. Then it would be very uh, unfortunate. And honestly speaking, such kind of people, when they hear these verses like Salokya Sarshti Samipya Sarupya Ekatvam Pyuta, or all these kinds of verses where devotees are time and again constantly rejecting liberation, uh, they will feel very uncomfortable actually. So in reality, I don't think when Maharaj quotes these statistics, it is true that uh, that when we are put into very distressful situation, we naturally endeavor to overcome the distressful situation. I am not denying that, but is that our most cherished desire, or is that an anartha? That we have to ask ourselves. And I personally don't feel that 95% of people would fall within that category. As an anartha, definitely we all want to escape suffering. No one wants to voluntarily suffer. That is there for sure. Right? In fact, he said that they do not want bhakti. Bhakti is too ephemeral and intangible, whereas mukti is very clear. Well, uh, yeah, again, uh, yeah, a professional psychologist naturally cannot differentiate between abhilasha and anartha. So I accept his uh, you can say I can understand what he mentions that, but in reality, no one is binding them. No one is catching hold of them and binding them to practice bhakti. It is all a voluntary thing. So therefore, why would they accept the path of bhakti and still aspire for liberation as an abhilasha? So I have my strong uh, reservations about accepting these statistics. If by that they mean abhilasha, to the extent that they say that they don't even want bhakti. Well, I mean, of course, you can share your own experience, if you do feel like that. But I personally don't feel that such a huge percentage of people would fall within that category. Of course, the professional psychologist cannot really differentiate between an abhilasha and an ananta, so probably he's mixing both of them. So we do not really understand the extent to which this desire for liberation is driving us. I don't deny that. Yes, none of us want to suffer. We want some comfort. But the point is, we do understand that ultimately we want to come to the stage where we do ahaituki bhakti, where our apratihata bhakti, where irrespective of whether we get comfort or not, we want to serve Krishna. Right? Often, devotees wonder, for example, how we can be aware of the desire for liberation in our consciousness. How do we know whether we, within our heart, we have desire for liberation or not? So Maharaj says here is a simple example. When some devotee has material trouble, if we say, but he's a devotee, why has misfortune come to him? Right? This is a very nice. So if we think that devotees should never suffer, which means we have a strong desire for mukti, because Krishna never promises that. Right? Krishna promises a relationship with him. But Krishna never promises that whoever takes up to my devotional service, he will not suffer at all. The suffering may not come via the agency of karma, but nevertheless, suffering might come in order to, uh, uh, you know, uh, uh, accelerate our purification and progress on the path of bhakti. This means that we become devotees in order to alleviate suffering and are driven by the motive of bhakti. Right? So, when a person strives for mukti, Raghunath Das Goswami says that this desire devours everything. Sarvatma Gilani. This tigress of desire for mukti or moksha is all consuming. People lose not only their intelligence, but ultimately they develop the desire to be a nobody, to turn into a non-entity. We have 3 more slides. I think we still have time to complete. Ultimately, Mayavad often gets reduced to this foolish statement. Everything is fine, there is no need to do anything or aspire for anything. So, this is the ultimate conclusion of Mayavad. Yeah. So, when people read this kind of thing, they take it at face value. They think, yeah, it must be right, right? They are told that at the end of the day, you have to become God and there is no good. Like that, Mayavadis say. We just need to go on and on, progress all the time, and broaden our experiences, acquiring increasingly more until our experiences become so great that we become God. This is the deception. This is the Mayavad. Everything will be spoken with a smile, and we will think that everything is fine. At one time, I read various Mayavad books, Maharaj says. They are all nonsense, but they sound so beautiful and poetic. Talk of mukti ultimately deprives us of our true selves in which we can exist eternally. Right? So uh, it they give such kind of incredulous hopes, right? So in that way, they actually deprive us of our inner purpose that we are always an eternal servant of Krishna. That's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu always said, Mayavadi Krishna Aparadi. Mayavada Bhashya Shunile Hai Sarvanamash. Right? Therefore, Raghunath Das Goswami warns us against this Mayavad, like that. So, this is something about Kata Mukti Vyagya Na Shrunu Kila Sarvatma Kilani. How this Mukti Kata or discussion about this Mukti or aspiration for Mukti is such a dangerous uh, detractor which distracts us from uh, actually the attaining the goal of liberation. Oh, sorry, attaining the goal of serving Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. So I think I will pause here, and if there are some quick comments, questions, discussions based on what we have discussed about this Mukti Katha, I will pause to see if there are any quick comments, questions. I see 2 hands already. Srinivas Prasad Prabhu, I'm unmuting. Yes, Prabhu. Wonderful.
Very beautifully explaining this concept, and today I'm really feeling that there are so many doubts which were there in the mind, but after going through this again, the last time also we read it, but today somehow by the mercy of Hari Guru and Vaishnavas, and you beautifully explained, but still there are some doubts which I just wanted to clear. That Prabhuji, what is the percentage of people in the category of Mukti Kami who can turn into devotees?
How can I give such a percentage? Bro? I have absolutely no idea.
Hare
Haribo?
Krishna.
Yeah,
Prabhuji,
I said, uh,
can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you too. I think your internet is little weak because your voice is breaking. And uh, so I said that, uh, like, I cannot, you asked what is the percentage of Mukti Kamis who can become devotees. I said, I have absolutely no idea. You know, how can I give such a percentage? You know, I don't think even the
From your
Shastras.
experience, matlab, is there matlab, because they are so uh, dry in the this knowledge, So they have developed such dry philosophy, and they don't want to serve the Lord. So
I have no idea, Prabhu. It's, I don't know. I have not really uh, met such people, or maybe I did meet. I did not notice. But honestly speaking, I have never. I don't have any statistical answer for that.
and another is like, do Mukti Kami, do they really feel that they want to become God, or the
Not
it,
all, not all Muktikamis have that desire. Actually, those who really aspire after Mukti and are following the right path for attaining it, they don't have a desire to become God. It is only the Mayavadis who want like that, and such Mayavadis do not attain Mukti at all. It is only their aspiration; they never attain it. But the real Muktikamis who are really aspiring after Mukti, actually, they don't want to become God.
is it basically because of the false ego that these Mukti Kamis, they don't is that the reason, that because of their false ego of not understanding themselves as servants of Krishna, is that the only aspect that they
Yeah, that is. See, it is not false ego. It is in one sense true but incomplete ego.
Mhm.
So they do not identify with their bodies. They have already realized that I am not this body. I am uh, a spirit soul. But beyond that, because they have not attained the association of devotees, so therefore, uh, their desire for becoming a, uh, servant of Krishna has not fully blossomed. It has not blossomed at all. So they are unfortunate people who never got an opportunity to come in touch with devotees. So therefore, but still they were committed to their spiritual practice. So because of which they could have some incomplete realization, but but without the association of devotees, they cannot develop the understanding that they Jivera Swarupa Krishna Namaste.
And as you rightly explained, this Kama Sarva Kama verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 2.3.10, that the karmis are better than uh, the mukti kamis, because they have chance to become devotees rather than mukti kamis. They have got so much into that dry philosophy of merging into Brahma Jyoti. They don't want to serve the Lord. Rather than karmis, if they are like, they want to enjoy, but if they are like they get association of devotees, there are chances that they can become the servants of the Lord and understand the philosophy. Rather than mukti kamis, they have so much dry philosophy, and they don't want to hear more of times that they never want to take the lower position servant.
No, no, no. I mean,
So how can we?
we don't have to demonize them like that. This is not true. Uh,
Mhm.
they are not just dry philosophers. So they are actually very, very qualified people. Actually, the point is that uh, uh, you know we are we should not present it in such a way that they are absolute demons like that. It's not like that. They are actually much more qualified than the Karmis. But the only
Okay.
problem is that their aspiration of liberation is much more attractive than the aspiration of a Karmi, which is who is aspiring after the temporary benefits of this material world. So it's just that actually these people, if you see in terms of qualification, they are way more qualified than the Karmis actually. But in one sense, but their aspiration, because it's so exalted, therefore to give up that aspiration and take up to the path of bhakti becomes difficult for them.
Like as Maharaj is mentioning that he read Mayavadi books, and he's saying that they are all nonsense, but they
Yeah,
sound
but
so beautiful and poetic.
correct, correct.
So how do you
But that
understand that they are all
see,
nonsense?
see here we are So comparing two things. So the Muktikamis, Mayavadis are one category of Muktikamis who are
Mm,
actually nonsense. But not
mm,
all Muktikamis are Mayavadis.
mm,
The proper Jnana Yogis, the proper Ashtanga Yogis, all of them are Muktikamis only. But they are proper practitioners. And they are definitely more qualified than the Karma Yogis or the Karmis.
mm.
So when you're talking about Muktikamis as Mayavadis, they are definitely nonsense. But in terms of proper practitioners of Jnana Yogis, they are not nonsense. They are actually, they
Yes,
worship at the personal form of the Lord
yes,
also.
yes. So how best can we serve such people to come into like to understand that Jivera Sarupa hai Krishna Nityadas? How best can we make them explain?
We don't have to explain them, we just have to give them a favorable experience in Krishna consciousness. That's all.
So, by that, mm, personally, I have seen that it's very difficult to change the understanding which they have attained
We
from
don't
last
have
so
to
many
do
years.
that. We don't have to do that. Yeah, they will not change like that. We just can aspire to give them a favorable experience in Krishna consciousness. Be nice to them. Be a good friend to them. That's all.
Mhm. Yes, last time also I discussed, and I am trying to do this the same way, and I feel that is helping to some extent.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Thanks a lot.
Krishna Prabhu, I'm on.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
So, Prabhu, you were mentioning that the liberation by itself is not deception. It's only that desire for liberation is deceptive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So liberation is very much reality.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you also mentioned later on that what is that? Mukti Manina or something you said, no? It's,
Vimukta
they,
Manina.
Vimukta Manina. They think that they have attained liberation. Actually, nobody attains liberation. Something
I
like that you
didn't
were
say
mentioning.
nobody attains. I
Hmm.
said these people don't attain liberation because they reject bhakti.
No, I didn't understand that point.
Because that verse says, Yenya Ravindaksha Vimukta Maninas Tvayasta Bhavad Avishuddha Buddhaya Arukya Krichrena Param Padam Tataha Patantyado Anadrita Yushmadangre. Because
Hmm.
Anadrita Yushmadangre means they disrespect the lotus feet of Krishna. So because they disrespect the lotus feet of Krishna,
Okay.
therefore they they think that by disrespecting they can attain liberation. They don't
Hmm.
attain liberation. But I didn't say that no one attains liberation.
Okay. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Venkat Govind Prabhu and
Krishna Prabhu, Dandat Pranam. Prabhuji, you said Mayavadis are a class of Muktikamis. So, what is the difference between the Mayavadi and their goal and the Muktikamis and their goal? It looks
yeah, I
almost
said,
similar.
yeah, Muktikamis, Mayavadis, they have same goal. I said Mayavadis are one kind of Muktikamis who reject the personal form of the Lord, who do not believe that the Lord has a form and all that. But not all Muktikamis accept that philosophy. There are Muktikamis, proper Muktikamis, the Shastric Jnana Yogis, Ashtanga Yogis, they accept the personal form, they worship personal form, but they aspire to merge into the impersonal Brahmajyoti. So such people are also Muktikamis. So they do practice a proper recommended path of Jnana Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga as described in Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. And they may attain Sahaja Mukti. They may attain impersonal liberation. But the problem with the Mayavadis is that they have a twisted, perverted understanding of the Shastras, perverted understanding of what they need to practice, and therefore there is a problem with them. And they reject the personal form of the Lord and they do not worship that personal form. So that is the problem with them. Therefore, they don't attain.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you all very much for your patient listening. So next week again we will continue this discussion. But next week we will have it on Tuesday only. We will not have it on Friday. But the week after that, we may have to make a small change. I will keep you informed. But today is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So after 3 days, we will again have the next week's discussion on Manah Siksha. So thank you all very much for your patient listening. I'm hoping to have your association coming Tuesday also. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Raghunath Das Goswami Pad ki jai. Shri Manah Siksha ki jai. Hare Krishna.